Now let's go back to this the companies, the 16 companies that bid for this for some of the power distribution companies. Now there are about 16 of them officially, but some of them were prominent on the list. Call them the top contenders. Integrated Energy Distribution and Marketing Limited that won about 4 of the distribution companies. You could just have that slide up on the screen for the Yola Disco, the Ibadan Disco, Eco Disco, and of course the Ikeja Disco. Now, looking at that list, the first thing that might cross the minds of some people is, do we even know these companies? Who are they? Who are the faces, behind these companies? I tried to look up websites of about some of them, at least the first 5. And I could only come up with about 2 or 3 websites. So we don't actually have like an official, like what do they do? Who are they? What are their balance sheet? What are their accounts, books like? Do they have enough money, the resources, the technical competence? Although the BP says, I know they have checked that and they perhaps have the technical competence. That parameter that they use called I believe it's the
ATAC.
The ATCNC, the what's the reduction, aggregate technical, commercial, and collection loss for over a 5-year period. So that just comes to mind that is that something we should look deeper into, at least for an advocacy group such as yours? Perhaps should we have that also come to the fore where we can take it apart and say, these are the people, these are the companies, we know them, we know how much they make, we know what they're here for, we know when they were incorporated, we just basically know them.
Actually, that is very important. We need to know. And again, I'll bring back NITEL again. We've had instances where companies said that they have technical backers, and you go and you find out the technical backers that were supposed to be their technical backers, their headquarters does not know anything about the technical backing that they're supposed to get. So I think it's very important for transparency, for us to know exactly, one, the companies, who are their technical backers, or where they're going to get their technical expertise. I think what happens in our country really is that a lot of times we have people who are willing to go after a piece of a project or company, but are not willing to put the technical expertise. If you don't have it, you can buy it. Companies today continue to buy technical expertise they do not have, but you need to have it on ground while you're going through the process to make sure that you deliver it.
So do you think perhaps if we have this information, there might be some more faith, because it looks like so much doubt has been cast on the process? It's very important. The power reforms, like you said, if we have power, it solves so many other problems in the country. Just to add more to the whole issue of transparency or the entire, the integrity of the entire process, do you think that perhaps the BP should also bring that out to the fore and say, okay, these are these people, we have these are their lists, these are who they are, what they are capable of, and all of that? It
is very, very important that for transparency, we need to find out exactly who they are. And one of the things that we have today working for us, which our organization was part of pushing, was the the freedom of press.
The freedom of information.
We now have that.
Okay.
And that's something that we should be pushing on, making sure that there is transparency so that we know exactly what is going on, and making sure that whoever gets these assets really has the technical expertise as well as the financial backing to execute these projects.
Now, talking about technical expertise, this a major parameter that was used in terms of percentage reduction. Okay, let me just spell it out how the BP puts it for us. The aggregate technical, commercial, and collection loss. That's meant to be over a 5-year period. So for those who made it to the list, I guess they hired the percentage. That means in the final analysis, lower cost in terms of tariff to the end user.
Yes.
So can you just, in very simple English, what does this mean, and how would it translate to in terms of benefit to the consumer?
Well, really, it's a number that is looking at who would deliver power at the most efficient rates to the consumer. And since one of the things under decentralization of power, we no longer have one unitary price for the total country. Depending on where you get your raw materials, which is either gas, or are you using hydro, or are you using fuel oil, those things, affect your cost and therefore your delivery. So who can perform the best? That's for the generation part. For the distribution part means you need to be able to distribute the power efficiently. What happens most of the times is, even though you generate the power, since your distribution lines are not efficient, you'll be having tons of losses. So for the discos, that's very important. They need to be able to, so if I put in 1 megawatt and the consumers get about 90% of that, that's very good. However, if I'm putting one and the consumers are getting only 40% of that because of bad power lines, because of transformers and all those things. And when you come again back to the pricing thing, one of the things that we have been asking the people in PHCN and the rest of them is, a lot of citizens in this country have invested in PHCN by buying transformers throughout the years. I live in an estate. In the last 3 years, we spent about 15 million for transformers. Who owns that? Who is selling it? Do we get a refund as citizens? You know, those are questions that we need to ask. Because, and you're smiling because that's the truth. A ton of people have paid for transformers, but when you paid, so-called, the PHCN owns it, but you paid for it. So those are the things that we really need to flush out. You
listened earlier to some of the objections made by the governors. Apart from mentioning that they're not too impressed with the process, some actually said, look, these distribution companies will need their own support. Like you said, governors can midwife this process. But do you see that as some kind of a spanner in the wheel? Because if these governors are talking the way they're talking, we don't know when it's going to be resolved. What do you see the entire process being like going forward?
I think it's very, very important for the federal government to really sit down with the governors and talk about this, because it is very important. Again, they normally say every government is local, and that's really what we've been trying to push. The governors need to be able to decide how much power they can midwife through their, to their citizens. It's a very important thing. And therefore, I call on the federal government to really sit down with the governors and really talk about this.
Now, let's look at what lies ahead for these companies. We know it's still in the early days, preliminary stages, but for the eventual winners, eventual companies that emerge, owners of these distribution companies, what are your expectations in terms of service delivery? And we know that they're going to be going into, at least for some remote parts of the country, where they're going to have to run, I'm not sure, power lines. They're going to go through some very remote communities, acquire right of way from some state governors. Hopefully they'll get that from the state governors. They'll have to acquire new equipment, perhaps some more cables, substations, etc. What are your expectations in terms of how easy it will be for them?
It would be difficult. Again, when we take a look at power or energy as a whole, really, we are here now sitting talking about power, but really there should be a compass energy policy. Earlier this year, January the 1st, the issue we had then was not PMS really going up. It was because the price for I Better Pass My Neighbor and their cousins went up. It was the price of energy that went up. That was really what was biting. So we really need to take a look at energy as a total. I'm glad to hear that companies like the co-distribution currently are talking about handing out energy efficient light bulbs, things like that. We need to take a look at it. We need to take a look at solar to supplement what is happening. Solar panels 4 years ago in the US were approximately $2.53. Today, those prices have dropped to almost $1. The other thing, too, that is important is the federal government has been talking about alternative energy for some time. But today, part of alternative energy like solar is your battery bank. Battery banks are still being charged at the same old rates for imports. Panels have been reduced to zero, but that's half of your cost is batteries. So we are calling on the federal government, the president, and the finance minister who is in charge of the customs regime to reduce or remove the prices on batteries so that people who want to enjoy alternative power in the villages and things like that can get a reduced price.